Welcome back to Wooden Sticks. I am Kevin Gorg, your host, recording today from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We are actually at the Talk North offices today with producer Alex Haugen, going to be joined by basketball legend Trent Tucker later on the show here today. And you may be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, this is a Wooden Sticks production. This is a hockey podcast. Why are you having Trent Tucker, this great basketball legend, on a hockey show? Well, he's a hockey dad, and he's a huge fan of the game. And last summer, Trent and I were lucky enough to be a part of the leadership summit that the Minnesota Wild put on every year, where the captains from every boys and girls high school hockey team throughout the state of Minnesota is invited. It's a free day of learning from some of the best. We've got college coaches, pro coaches, players, and then you've got luminaries that speak, and Trent was one of our speakers, and he was just incredible on his journey as a hockey dad. He's got two boys, William and James, that play locally. They live out of Eden Prairie. One boy is going to play down at Shattuck St. Mary's. One boy is going to play for the Eagles at Eden Prairie. And Trent's just become a fan of the game. When you get entrenched with it, following your kids' hockey journey, you learn to pick up the nuances of the game. And obviously Trent competed at a very, very high level. Was born in North Carolina, played high school basketball in Flint, Michigan. And then I was a young kid in 1978 when he got to the U of M to play for Jim Dutcher and the Golden Gophers. He was a tremendous, tremendous shooting guard, and ended up having his number retired for the Golden Gophers. That 32 hangs in the rafters. In 1982, which was his final year there, his senior year, they were Big Ten champions, got to go to the NCAA tournament, won a game, were upset, I believe, in round two. We'll ask Trent about that. I think it was Louisville, if my memory here at age near 60 hasn't given way. And then, of course, we know all about the NBA, where he was the 6th overall pick from the New York Knicks that next year, played there until the early 90s, had a little cup of coffee in San Antonio, and then would win an NBA championship with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in 1993. So I want to get into, not only, being an outstanding college player and what that was like and playing in the NCAA tournament, but then being a high draft pick in the NBA and that kind of pressure that you play. If that ties over to any sport, right? Like when you're a top 10 pick in the NBA, there's pressure that comes with that. And then I'm really curious. I can't wait to hear Trent's opinion on what's going on in Toronto. Another disappointing finish for the Maple Leafs this year. And I've been to Toronto for the last 2 decades on a regular basis with my Wild gig. There is a fishbowl feeling up there for those players, and there's a ton of pressure, and it's a big market, and they live and die with the Maple Leafs. And a lot of other NHL players and coaches, after the Leafs got ousted here in this most recent round, were defending Toronto, saying most teams don't have to deal with that. In fact, a lot of the Florida Panthers talked about where they play in Sunrise down in Florida and how it's a completely different animal than playing in Toronto. I want to ask Trent about playing in these big markets. He played at Madison Square Garden, the most famous arena in the world. He played in New York. He played in Chicago with Michael Jordan. I don't think there could possibly be more pressure than those two environments. So maybe we can translate that into some hockey talk with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then obviously I want to get into some of the coaches he played for, from Jim Dutcher over in Dinkytown to Phil Jackson, who's widely considered one of the greatest NBA coaches in the history of the game. And then playing with a guy like Michael Jordan, like a lot of our listeners here on the Talk North podcast network, but specifically here on Wooden Sticks, going through the pandemic, one of the silver linings for me, and I think a lot of you, was being able to dive into some really cool programs on platforms like Netflix. And the one that I think was the most watched was The Last Dance. And here's a guy in Trent Tucker that can really take us behind the curtain as to what that experience was like, playing with Michael Jordan, practicing with and against Michael Jordan, some of the mind games he would play. That ties into the game of hockey at all levels. And so really looking forward to the conversation with Trent today. That's going to be awesome. A hockey dad's perspective on the game we love so much. As far as the hockey playoffs go, I'm recording this midweek. You're getting this on the weekend. But as we sit here right now, both the series in the East and the West are 3-1. And it's really starting to look like a rematch of last year's Stanley Cup, which was an epic 7-game battle where Florida had that 3-0 lead in that cup final. Edmonton stormed back with 3 wins. It went to game 7. I think everybody has, outside of Florida, has a soft spot for McDavid and all the folks up in Canada. They haven't won a cup there in over 30 years. McDavid being the face of the league, the best player on the planet. There's a lot of angles I can work myself to cheer for that team. Now I'm torn because I love Coach Maurice and I love Nate Schmidt. Nate did not win that cup last year. Nate's a St. Cloud product. I've known him since he was a sophomore in high school. He's a wonderful human being playing for the Gophers. He'd have a chance to win his cup, and that'd be pretty darn cool if that could be the storyline for Florida. Big news here midweek for Edmonton. Zach Hyman, one of their top goal scorers. No, he's not Draisaitl, and he's not McDavid, but probably the next in line as far as importance goes. Off the hit that he took in game number 4, he is now out for the season, going to require surgery, and that's a dramatic change into the Oilers lineup. So that to me, I still think they get through and survive against Dallas. They've looked phenomenal. I think, 16-2 in their last 18 playoff games. They've been really peaking at the right time. They did not look like a team during the regular season that was ready to defend their Western Conference title. But as the playoffs have gone on, they've gotten better and better game by game. And a lot of people, including myself, doubted their goaltending. That has turned around completely. Skinner, after he was banged up and really struggling, has come back and been incredible. He's actually outplaying Jake Ottinger. I never saw that happening, but it's going on right now. And that's the beauty of the Stanley Cup playoffs, how the momentum can turn, how certain position players can flip that script upside down. It's looked like Florida over Carolina every step of the way. I know the Hurricanes did get a win in game 4 to prolong the series, but I think it's going to be Florida and Edmonton again. No Zach Hyman. Still, I think it's going to be a great cup final. It's been super fun to watch. Having a little FOMO with, the fact that the Wild aren't playing. And I do have to tip the cap to the other team in town who did get it done this year and defended their title, the Minnesota Frost. We've had one of their best players, Taylor Heisey, on the show. We anticipate more players joining us here this summer to reflect on what was another magical season. Ironically, very similar season where they barely got in the playoffs and struggled down the stretch and then got to the postseason and almost flipped the switch. They're a veteran team. They've got a lot of players that have won a lot of championships in all different places all over the world, and it shows come postseason time. They just elevate their game, and specifically looking forward to connecting with Maddie Rooney, who, again, they rotated goalies all season, but she kind of took over late, specifically in that finals matchup with Ottawa. And it was really cool to see them win it this year on home soil. And the crowd was fantastic. Over 11,000 fans were there to see that Game 4 victory. And I was watching right along with them on my Barca Lounger and cheering for the Purple. We had raced that day at Canterbury, came home from work, got to see the last 2 periods on TV into overtime. All 4 games went to overtime in the final. So congratulations to Coach Klee and everybody involved with the Minnesota Frost. Again, we'll have some guests here this summer and reflect on what a fabulous season that was. And we'll continue to track the Stanley Cup playoffs as we always do here on the program. But up next, looking forward to that conversation with hockey dad and basketball legend Trent Tucker. Before we get to that, I want to thank some of our sponsors. And we'll start with one of our newer sponsors, the good folks at 10K's Construction.
Randy Shaver here. I'm bringing back Shaver's Prep Football Podcast beginning the end of July. Every week, we'll dive into the best of Minnesota high school football, and I'm proud to say we're now powered by 10K Construction, Minnesota's go-to guys for roofing, siding, decks, windows, and everything in between. After severe weather hits, they'll even come out and give you a free, honest inspection to make sure your home is in good shape. Schedule your free honest inspection today at 10kconstruction.com or call 763-200-6064 for more information. That's 763-200-6064. The land of 10K Construction.
Also want to thank the folks over at Onyx Maps.
Have you ever driven past a piece of land and wondered who owns that? Or maybe you need to know exactly where a property line runs. That's where Onyx Hunt comes in. And it's not just for hunters. There are folks using onX for their jobs every day throughout the country, from farmers and ranchers mapping out their fields, wildland firefighters navigating rough terrain, to construction workers needing to know who owns what property. This app offers something for everyone. If you need the best land ownership maps, aerial imagery, and property boundaries in your pocket, onX Hunt is the tool for the job. Try it free for 7 days. Download onX Hunt in the app or Google Play Store, or visit onxmaps.com/hunt to get started.
And of course, my dear friend John Schweitz and Minnesota Masonic Charities. When people think of the Freemasons, they often think of secret handshakes and unusual hats, and of course, the pancake breakfast. Minnesota Masonic Charities would prefer that you think about the work that they do right here in our community. Places like the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota, or the Masonic Children's Hospital and the Masonic Home in Bloomington. They are just a few examples of the important work that the Freemasons support here in Minnesota. As part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, Masons have consistently answered the call when it comes to charitable needs. I am happy that Minnesota Masonic Charities has chosen Minnesota Bound and this podcast as a place to help spread the word. We look forward to learning so much more about their many programs here in the weeks to come, along with the good people from Lexus at Wayzata and Maplewood.
Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. If you're in the market for a new luxury vehicle, look no further than my good friend Charlie Swanson at Lexus. Whether you're on the west or the east side of the Twin Cities, they have got you covered with two great locations, Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Check out the all-new Lexus TX, a spacious SUV with 3 rows of seating and plenty of room for all your gear. Head over to lexusofwayzata.com or lexusofmaplewood.com for details and to find your next ride today.
All right, we're back on Wooden Sticks. As I mentioned in our introduction to the show, super excited to be joined by basketball legend and hockey dad, Mr. Trent Tucker. Trent, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Fun to have you in studio. We don't get to always have our guests with us face-to-face, a little more conducive to connecting. And you and I have worked together, and I've listened to you for years, and it's been fun. Last summer, the Wild Leadership Summit, to hear your journey now as a hockey dad. You've got 2 boys that play. Tell us about them.
Well, it's been a fun journey. It was a learning curve for sure. You know, for a guy who knew nothing about hockey, you know, I enjoyed the game, but I knew nothing about the game. And all of a sudden now when you have 2 guys and 2 kids in your household, you know, who's doing this on a daily basis, you have to learn very quickly.
And their journey has taken them to 2 different places, Eden Prairie with the Eagles and, of course, Shattuck St. Mary's. That's a different dynamic all by itself, because one's at a boarding school, one's right in the town where you live playing for the local team. How do you think the boys will do with those circumstances?
Well, you know, they support each other, you know, a great deal. And that's the happiest thing I've been about, especially as a father, you know, to see your 2 kids get along so well. And they support each other, you know, every single day, and they push each other to get better. You know, James is my youngest, and he's going to Shattuck. He's leaving home for the first time at the age of 14. His brother, William, who is 15, is there to support him every single day, is trying to help him prepare and get ready for what's ahead. He knows that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a major adjustment, you know, but, you know, he's there for his younger brother, and for my wife, Melina, and I as parents, you know, that's a great thing to see.
Yeah, in the game of hockey in Minnesota, so many opportunities. And for your boys to see them have this journey, make the friends you make at the rink. I've got lifelong friends, Trent, that I grew up playing hockey with way back to when I was 6 and 7 years old. Hockey brings that group together. I'm sure a lot of the ways basketball did for you. What has that experience been like to see your boys cultivate those type of friendships within the game of hockey?
Well, you know, that's the beauty of team sports. You know, it forces you to have to communicate with people from all different walks of life. And the only way you're going to have a good team, at some point in time, you guys have to come together. And also it's life lessons that you learn. You know, you get to know and learn about where somebody else grew up and where they come from and how they think and how they operate on a daily basis. And then you see if what I bring to the table and what you bring to the table, we can find a way to coexist.
Did you assume when they were little kids, I mean real little, before they probably put skates on, because you were such a great basketball player, did you just think, well, they'd likely find their way to basketball? Or how did that process kind of take place where they were able to kind of branch off and do something different?
We just let it happen, and all of a sudden, they gravitated to hockey sticks. But my nephew played college hockey at Gustavus, Drew Aspinwall, and he went to Maple Grove High School. So when my kids were about 3 or 4, I used to make the journey down to Gustavus just about every other weekend to watch them play hockey. And when they were about 5 or 6, they really got into the game. They started to skate, as you mentioned, about 3 or 4. And the game just took on a whole new life for them and for me as well. And it was just fun to see how they have grown, because the first time they got out there with really good kids who could skate, my kids were so far behind. I said, I thought you guys could skate, but you guys can't skate at all. You have a long way to go. And all of a sudden you get into these different programs with these different teachers. They're teaching different skills. And my kids were not there. They were falling down. They were tripping over themselves. And I'm thinking, well, this is not going to last too long, because eventually they're going to say, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore. So I asked them, I said, are you guys okay with this? They said, yeah, we're okay. I said, but you guys are behind, you're falling down, and, you just can't keep up at this stage. And my oldest son, William, said to me, and he was about 6 years old, and I'll never forget this. He said, you know what, Dad? I said, what? He said, one day I won't fall.
Huh. And
that one day came, and now he's not falling anymore.
No, from all accounts, I've got friends that have watched your kids play at different levels, and they're terrific players, which is super exciting. And, it's fun because I think a lot of our listeners here that are going to come to this podcast have heard you for years, and your personality comes through pretty clearly when I hear you on The Fan, on In the Zone with Cindy. You're a no-nonsense guy. Like, you are a guy that practices what you preach. And for you, I think you've had great success on the court, but I think your greatest success has been how you've carried yourself off the court. The respect that you've been able to gain from your teammates and your coaches is the way you carried yourself. And I believe, listening to you as a hockey dad, that you've probably brought some of that to your kids. And there's probably been circumstances where they've had to turn the other cheek. I know from listening to you speak last year in that Wild Leadership Summit that, unfortunately, and I don't think this is the majority, I really don't, but there are some real jackasses in the game of hockey. It's predominantly a white game. And when African-American players come to the game, and I've talked to others that have had kids that have played, unfortunately, circumstances come up. Mm-hmm. And I was fascinated, Trent, by your message to those captains last year of all the teams throughout the state of Minnesota to your boys in that circumstance. And could you share with our listeners what you tell them when some of that stuff pops up?
Well, it's life, and these things happen. But, at the end of the day, you can't let that situation define your purpose. And why are you here? You're here to be a hockey player. You're here to be the best teammate that you can be. And at the end of the day, you don't want someone or something to take you off the journey that you're trying to accomplish. And there are going to be bumps and bruises along the way. We all understand that. But it's not about what happens to you. It's about how you deal with it. And if you think it's tough today, well, you keep getting better. It's going to be tougher tomorrow as well. And just hoping along this journey, the things that you have learned will prepare you, if you are lucky enough, to get better and stay in this game for a long time, because these situations are going to happen again.
Are these two guys pretty close? You're making it sound like your two boys are pretty tight. Have they played on a lot of teams together growing up?
This past year was the first time they played together in association hockey. Now, they have played some AAA hockey together, but this was the first time they were on the same team in District 6. And it was fun for me to see every once in a while they got a chance to play together because they're both defensemen. And for any parent, knowing that you can only go to the rink one time is a good thing.
The schedule's crazy, as you know, right. And it never slows down. People think hockey's a winter sport. It's become a year-round sport, especially if you're going to play at a high level like your boys are tracking to do. And I think that friendship's going to help them too, because even though they're not going to be in the same locker room, they're going to have a chance to bounce off each other, different stories, different situations that are going to arise. And that bond that they've certainly got, having gone through this together, having you as their dad and having that great family background, I think will serve them well. And in this world we live in now, Trent, we're so easily connected. Even though they're going to be, 40, 50 miles apart, they can, in press of a button, they can be on FaceTime together, sharing their story of that particular game.
No doubt about it. And, and William, who's my oldest, he's already helping his young brother about, playing angles here and using your body here and keeping your head up and making sure that now you catch the puck without looking at it, so that when the game becomes faster, your response to get the puck to where it's supposed to go a little bit quicker, because the better talent that you face, the athlete's going to be quicker and stronger. And if you are a half a second late and making that pass, that player is no longer there. So they are having those conversations now. And because he knows that once his younger brother goes to Shattuck, the ball game is different.
Mm-hmm. Big time. Yeah. It's a big step. And I used to go to summer hockey school at that facility. Herb Brooks would coach his Minnesota hockey schools out of that campus. And it's a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful place.
It's amazing. And I think the experience is going to be wonderful. They play a different schedule, obviously, than our high school teams play. But both these guys are going to have the opportunity now to take their game to another level.
Yeah, and if you're a good player in the Lake Conference, because you can, you got a decent game, because the Lake Conference is very, very tough, and you got so many good teams and so many good players, and you have to be on your A game. You have to be ready to go. And the preparation that you put in now prepares you for November and December. And that's the one thing I try to give to them, is that the work ethic, putting in the work. Every time you go to the rink, every time you go to a skate, every time you go to, some sort of session that you're going to go to, play 3-on-3, 4-on-4, whatever it may be, what's your purpose? Why are you here? What are you trying to accomplish today? So what you do today, you're hoping that it can benefit you tomorrow and to get you ready to help your teammates down the road.
As a hockey parent, you've kind of been thrown into the world of the game. But I look back at your career, obviously you played college basketball at the U of M. Golden Gopher hockey's been pretty darn good. You played for the New York Knicks, sharing the same famous arena, MSG, as the New York Rangers. And then, of course, when you got to Chicago to play with MJ, you're sharing a building that is shared by the Chicago Blackhawks. Whether it was your time at the U of M or either one of those stops in the National Basketball Association, was there time for you to even dive into hockey, or were your schedules too conflicting to even get involved in the game?
I had the great fortune of getting to know Herb Brooks because, the hockey team and the basketball team pretty much shared the same training room.
Mm-hmm.
And and they were really good back then as well. I got to know Neil Broughton, Aaron Broughton, because we were all in college at the same time. So, and I would talk to Herbie in between, practices, and he would give me his philosophy and stuff about the game. And it was just interesting for me to have an opportunity to speak to someone, at that level. Jim Dutcher was a great basketball coach and a great mind. And I was very fortunate to play for him as well. But knowing that Herb Brooks was maybe 200 feet down the hall, that was special also. The year I got drafted to the New York Knicks in 1982, the New York Rangers hired Herb Brooks as the head coach. And so he and I not only spent some time in Minnesota, but we also took the trip to New York together as well.
How cool. And, I was lucky enough to get to know Herbie over the years. He had a friendship with my dad, who was the golf pro at the time at the Faribault Golf and Country Club. I've told the story before where Herbie would bring the coaches over and play golf, and I got to go to the hockey school. It was kind of a back and forth deal. And then I played against his son, Danny, for years. We were the same age and played against each other in peewees and squirts and bantams, the whole thing. Herbie had an amazing passion for what he was doing, and he was single-minded in it. But what I loved about Herbie is when you got him away from the intensity of what he did, and he was an intense guy, he had a heart of gold, and he would share all those stories. And I was lucky enough to get some of those stories, and it sounds like you were as well.
And, as a player, you're always looking for an edge. And if you're lucky enough to sit down and have a conversation with some of the great minds of another game, it can translate to what you do in your game. I was very fortunate, like I said, to have Jim Dutcher on one side, but then have Herb Brooks 200 feet away. That was special to have also.
It's funny, you mentioned your boys played defense, and one of the all-time great college coaches that we lost a couple years ago, Mike Sertich, coached at UMD forever, legendary coach. I had the opportunity one afternoon to take in I think it was 3 or 4 games. It was a sectional day over at Aldrich Arena, and I was there to scout because I was coaching at the time, and he was there to recruit. And luckily enough, I sat next to him, Trent, and he brought out this basketball fundamentals book, and I looked at him like, this is a longtime hockey coach. He doesn't look like anybody that's been around a basketball gym at any point in his life. And he started telling me about how he used basketball and the man-to-man defense that a lot of basketball coaches use, and tied that into what his Bulldogs would do when they had all that success and were going to the national tournament and playing for national championships. And I was fascinated at how convinced he was that defense in basketball and hockey were so interwoven. Do you feel that way now watching hockey?
I see it because you talk about breakouts.
Yeah.
That's a fast break.
It is.
Yeah. And who's the last line of defense?
Goalie.
There you go. And who's the guy? Rudy Gobert, Patrick Ewing,
The
Kim
center.
Olajuwon. Right. Last line of defense. They are the guys that's going to provide that resistance from trying to get the ball into the basket. And all of a sudden now, when I know I got that guy behind me, I can cheat. I can pinch. I can get up and now and play that winger a little bit tighter. I can guard that guard a little bit closer. So when I look at hockey and basketball, I see a lot of similarities.
That's fantastic. And I watched hockey that day, and he had this book, and we were going through all the different, strategies of the game on the court with basketball. And then he would tie in different sequences in the game where teams could have done something better, and the switches and some of those things that we see now as we watch in the NBA playoffs. We're all tuned in. And it's fascinating to me. I never looked at it that way. I always thought they were completely separate. And he, being a legendary coach that he was able to find an edge from a coaching perspective that he brought to his program. And I can't get over thinking about that now as I look at this great basketball mind in front of me in you, and how you can kind of see some of that play out when you watch hockey at the highest level. And I'll use the National Hockey League. I know you're a fan of the Minnesota Wild, and you see some of the great players. Let's throw out a guy like Connor McDavid. When you see that player on the rink, does it bring you back to that time being around Michael Jordan? Because I look at McDavid when I'm able to watch the Wild play the Oilers, and when he's on the ice, I can't look at anybody else. I got to tell you, I'm locked in on him. Do you see those comparisons too?
Oh yeah. I mean, when you're talking about the best of the best.
Yep.
I mean, generational talent. When I first heard about the NHL draft, and the two guys that came to my knowledge, I knew nothing about the NHL draft: Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel.
Mm.
And when people would talk to me about hockey, I said, well, this year the 1 or 2 guys are going to be Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel. Somebody said, well, how do we know that? I said, I just heard their name. And then all of a sudden I realized that when I got a chance to see Connor McDavid play for the first time, I was like, wow. I mean, how can a guy be that good? I said, but you know what? I played with the guy, number 23, and people were asking me the same question. How can a guy be that good? And Connor McDavid, when you watch him play, like you said, you can't take your eyes off of him, because in the blink of a second, he might do something that you've never seen before.
And Michael was that guy. We got the chance to get to know Michael a little bit during the pandemic. Everybody seemed to tune into The Last Dance. It was an remarkably well done documentary covering the Chicago Bulls. He was not an easy guy to practice with or against. In your time in Chicago, did you sense some of that throughout the season? Because like hockey, the basketball season is a grind. Guys are going to get on it. You know how it is. Same thing in the locker room. Like there's going to be good days and bad. Did you sense some of that?
No, because I understood the competitive nature of Michael Jordan. I played against him for 6-7 years. But to me, he was a wonderful teammate. He was all about winning. He was never going to ask us to be Michael Jordan. He was only going to ask you to do the things 100% that you were brought here to do. That's all he cared about. Michael Jordan becomes hard to play with. Magic Johnson is hard to play with. LeBron James is hard to play with when you don't want to be in the spotlight. And what I mean by that, those guys are going to play deep into the playoffs. Only a few teams are going to be left. More eyeballs now begin to watch the last few teams play. And if you're on one of those teams and you're in that rotation, they're going to put you in the spotlight at some point in time for you to have to perform. And if you don't want to be in that spotlight, that's when those guys become hard to play with.
Which makes sense. We could see during that documentary the fierce competitor that Michael Jordan was, and I think will always be, whether he's playing basketball, playing golf, that coin game they had.
Oh, yeah.
He just wants to win every time.
Yeah, and you have to let Michael be Michael. I can't compete against MJ. And the thing here is that you don't join Michael Jordan's team to compete with him. You don't join Michael Jordan's team to be better than him. The only question you're asking yourself, am I good enough to play with him? And if I can play with him, I'm going to play basketball for a very long time.
It makes complete sense.
Because he's going to pass me the ball. The respect that you earn as a player when you play with greatness is when they are willing to pass you the puck or pass you the ball. Playing with Sidney Crosby. Is Sidney Crosby willing to pass me the puck in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals and I can cash in? Me and Sid are going to be close for a very long time. That relationship is never going to break down. But if I'm afraid to be in that position, well, then Sidney Crosby is too hard to play with.
This is Mark Rosen. Check out my weekly podcast, Rosen Sports Monday, on the Talk North Podcast Network. Each week, I break down everything in Minnesota sports with in-depth analysis and a guest-driven format. You'll hear from media insiders, superstar athletes, and legends of the game. Don't miss it.
Let's go back to where it all started. You played high school basketball in Flint, Michigan. How did you end up in Minnesota? Certainly you were a terrific player, and you likely, Trent, had multiple options. How was Jim Dutcher able to get you to come to Minnesota? What were some of those choices back then?
Well, Jesse Evans was an assistant coach at the time for Jim Dutcher, and I had known Jesse Evans since I was in junior high school back in Flint. He was the assistant coach at the high school that I went to at Flint Northwestern. So in my sophomore year, we had 3 classes back then, 10, 11, and 12. He was a JV coach, and the first day I got to practice, I tried out for the JV team. And the varsity coach came down and said, well, I see you at varsity practice tomorrow. And Jesse's like, well, you're taking my best player. He says, yeah, I know. He said, I'm hoping one day he's going to be my best player. Okay. And after my sophomore year, Jesse Evans left to join Jim Dutcher's staff at the University of Minnesota. I really wasn't thinking about college basketball at that time. And he said, well, in 2 years, I will be back to recruit you. I'm like, yeah. Because during those days in Flint, Michigan, not many guys had gone on to Division I basketball. Maybe a few here or there, but not many. So as a young guy, the only thing you thought about, how can I be the best basketball player in the city of Flint? Because that was the biggest thing for all of us kids growing up. in the inner city. But as I moved on to my junior year and got into my senior year, all of a sudden now you start to receive letters from all these different colleges around the country. And now you are saying to yourself, well, this is possible. This could be real. I could be leaving home one day and playing college basketball at the highest level. And so when I realized that all these things could happen, and when I began to narrow down my choices, it came down to 3 final schools: Iowa, UCLA, and Minnesota.
Whoa.
And I took a trip to Iowa. Silas McKinney, who all of a sudden was on Clem Haskins' staff, was the assistant coach for Lute Olson down in Iowa. And my mother she was in love with Silas McKinney. He had sold her, like no other could sell my mother, okay? In terms of, your son needs to come to Iowa City. UCLA had a coach named Gene Bartow. And Gene Bartow had invited me out to UCLA's basketball camp when I was 15. I was going to UCLA.
I would have assumed that, yeah.
At 15 and 16. I was going to UCLA. And then Gene Bartow, in my senior year in high school, left UCLA and went to the University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Oh, wow.
And I knew that Minnesota was very close among those 3. I took my recruiting trip weekend in October of 1977. The University of Michigan was ranked number 1 in the country in football. And they were playing the University of Minnesota at Memorial Stadium. The Gophers knocked off the number 1 team in college football on that Saturday afternoon. And when I got in the car, headed back to the airport, I said, you know what? This just might be the right place for me to go and play college basketball at. And at the end of the year, I called Jesse Evans and I told him, I said, you know what? My choice to play college basketball and to go to school would be the University of Minnesota. And I told Silas, I said, if Minnesota was not in the picture, I said I would have been an Iowa Hawkeye in the blink of an eye.
Wow.
But I made, for me, the best choice that I made in my life was coming here to play basketball at the University of Minnesota. It's because it opened up my world like no other. I was going to a major metropolitan area. I was getting a chance to play Division I in the Big Ten. I was on a big college campus. I've always had the personality where I want to be a part of something big. I like being in the big atmosphere. And, Williams Arena was 17,500 at that time on a large college campus with 50,000 plus students in the big metropolitan area. It fit my personality perfectly.
And you had great chemistry with Jim Dutcher, clearly, because 4-year player, it felt like watching that you got better and better and better in your 4 years. So looking back, it probably was a great decision. What was special about Jim Dutcher as a coach?
He allowed us to grow as young men. He gave us rules and regulations. But, the one thing I loved about Dutch was that he said, hey, if you want to get better, here's the key to Williams Arena. You know where the light box is at. I see you guys in October.
Huh.
He says, so if you want to get better, you have to have a purpose on why you think your team should win the Big Ten championship, and it starts with you.
Huh.
He said, I see you in October. And he said, if you guys are a team, then you will police each other. When you get up and go to the gym at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning when school is out, you're going to drag your teammates with you. And when your teammates are okay about getting up at 6:30 a.m. to go work out every day, well, then we know we got something moving in the right direction. But he allowed us to be young men. He allowed us to grow. He was there if we needed him, but I enjoyed the space and the responsibility that he gave me as a young man. And to me, that was tremendous and huge.
And by your senior year, you were Big Ten champions. And now, Trent, you've developed into a superstar player. At what point in your college journey did you start to think about another big milestone? Because let's go back to when you were at Flint. You were talking about being the best player in that area. In college seemed like many, many worlds away. Now you're here. Now you're playing on a big stage. You're going to the NCAA tournament. You're winning a Big Ten championship. And now, the NBA is certainly at some point got to be on your mind. What was that like?
Well, I remember when my junior year, we'd go out to Connecticut to play UConn in the NIT. And here's my real first exposure to the East Coast. And I have a big game. I have a 35-point game. And all of a sudden now, your name is in the conversation as being a first-round draft pick the following year. Some are asking, are you going to come out of college after your junior year? And I say, I'm not ready yet to take the next step. But I knew going into my senior year that was going to be the year of the shooting guards. So everything kind of fell into place for me. So when I started the season out, I was ranked in the top 15 as a potential first-round draft pick. I could either fall out of the first round or I could move into the top 10. And the only way I could move into the top 10 was not by scoring more points, but my team having great success. And when my team was able to win the Big Ten championship, and I had those moments where in major games, I would get 20 or 25 points. All of a sudden, now you begin to stand out. Not that I went on an average 20 points a game, but because my team won the Big Ten championship, all of a sudden now more eyes and more visibility is coming your way. You are being judged in a different situation by the guys who are taking looks at you now. Can he play on a good team? Is he unselfish enough to give of his game to make somebody else better? So all those things now began to fall into place. It moved me from number 15 into the top 10. But if it wasn't for the success of the guys who I played with, maybe those things are not possible.
So you get picked 6th overall, and you get picked by the New York Knicks. For a young guy that's still a college student, that has to be almost overwhelming to be picked not only that high, but know you're going to the biggest city in North America. As a kid, how did you digest that?
Well, like I had mentioned before, I've always wanted to be in the big environment.
Yep.
And, coming to college here was a major environment compared to Flint, Michigan. But going to New York City was an ultimate environment. And
doesn't get any bigger.
It doesn't get any bigger than that. And I've always wanted to go to different places and figure out, how can I fit into that community? How can I be a part of this society? How can I find stability? So it was more of a challenge, not just to play basketball, but also to find stability and to find home in the biggest market, that the country had to offer. But I was very lucky to have a great agent. His name was Erwin Weiner. He's passed along now. But having him as a reference and someone who could guide me and talk to me about the importance of the things I needed to do as a professional athlete was huge for me. And it's because he was like a second father. And he was in New York City as well. So my agent wasn't somewhere outside of New York. I could drive 15, 20 minutes to Westchester County and sit down and have those conversations with him, when I was looking for advice.
So you're in New York, you're a rookie, and having been there, it's my favorite city to visit when I travel with the Wild with a bullet. Like nothing else comes close for me like New York. But you've got a lot of money in your pocket. You're a young guy. You're playing for the New York Knicks, and there are distractions, Trent, everywhere, any time of the day, every day. How do you separate the basketball from all the fun?
My first mentor was Dr. J. Because Dr. J and I had the same agent. And having, that voice in your ear and having that individual who at that time was the face of the NBA. Someone you could pick up the phone and call, and he would give you free advice. And he would sit down and talk to you. And he always kept me in a mindset of that, what is your purpose? Why are you here? You can enjoy New York City, but make sure that you don't lose your purpose. And then having the great fortunes of having a teammate like Truck Robinson. When I was a rookie and you go through ups and downs and you're not playing and the coaches are screaming at you every day and the fans are booing you here and there and you're not getting as much playing time as you would like, veteran guys, they don't have to help you if they don't want to because they can see you as competition. And he pulled me to the side one day and he said, now, it's a long season. I know things are not going well for you at this stage. He said, but at some point in time, we're going to need you. And you're going to have to keep yourself ready. And this is going to be my advice to you. Now, you don't have to listen, but this is my advice to you. Practice times are short. We don't have long practice days for you to get in shape or to stay in shape. So you're going to have to do some things once practice is over. Stay in with assistant coaches, get some extra reps, get some extra time on the court. You may have to go find pickup games at night when we're not playing at the local health clubs or whatever. And I did those things just to make sure that I was ready. And I went through a stretch where I hadn't played for 15 straight games. I didn't get in, whether we were up by 20 or down by 20. Hubie Brown, for some reason, he wasn't going to play me. The late Ray Williams, who also was the Minnesota grad, went down with an ankle injury in a game on a Saturday night against, at that time, the Nets were in New Jersey, right at the end of the first half. So I'm thinking that he plays 4 guards. I'm going to get 8 seconds, 10 seconds. I just want to take my warm-up jacket off. I just want to run down the floor once, okay? And if I can do that, I'm going to be the happiest guy in New York City. So we get in the locker room and we're sitting around and he comes in and he says, okay, let's get ready for the third quarter. We need to work on X, Y, and Z. And he says, oh, Tucker, yeah. He said, by the way, you're going to start the third quarter. I said, run it by me again? He says, get ready to play. You're going to start the third quarter. And Truck Robinson looked at me. He said, are you ready? I said, yeah, I'm ready to roll. And by having him as a mentor and the guy who had been in the league for almost 10 years, he knew that this day was coming. So all of the experience and all of the information that I have gathered along the way comes from the people who came before me. And the best way for me to pay them back is by passing on the knowledge. So for all the young kids I talk to, I always tell them, stay ready because you never know when that next opportunity is coming.
And you were ready clearly because the rest is history, right?
I was ready to step in, and Ray Williams missed 20 games with a bad ankle injury. We were in the thick of our schedule. We had the 76ers, the Celtics, coming up, the Milwaukee Bucks, and then we were going on the West Coast swing. And I was going to have to play now. And during that stretch, we went 18-2 with me in the starting lineup. But if I had not had those types of teammates and mentors, maybe I don't get 11 or 12 years out of the NBA. My career could have been cut short because when that moment came, I wouldn't have been ready. And Hubie Brown easily could have said, you know what? He's not my guy anymore. And that's how close a player can become from having a 10-year or 12-year career or playing basketball or playing hockey for 2 years at the highest level.
We're going to close with this, Trent. I've been waiting on this question throughout our conversation because so much this year in the hockey playoffs was made of the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're always a lightning rod. They're like the Yankees or the Red Sox in baseball. It's a huge market. It's a hockey-crazy market. And I heard some players and coaches throughout the league talk about the pressure that the Maple Leafs have to play with. And some of the guys were in Florida saying, we're in Sunrise and we don't have that same kind of pressure that the guys do up in Toronto. And I look at your pro career, and I know there was a San Antonio stop in between, but most of it in New York and Chicago. And having worked in those markets and seen the type of media coverage, even like a morning skate gets, it feels different in New York and Chicago than it does in other places. And so as you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, is that a legitimate part of their, I don't want to say failures because that's not really the right word, but they haven't yet won a cup and they've had teams that have been good enough to do so. How much of playing in those big markets can wear on you as a pro team?
It can wear on you for sure. It's because not only are you hearing it from the fans who come to the game or the media who covers the game, but you're hearing it every time you walk out the door. So someone somehow is always talking about your failures. Because I can read the newspaper. I know whether I played well or not the other night. I know how the fans responded to my performance on the floor. But also I got my neighbor down the street, telling me, oh, you guys stink again. I can't believe I got to live through this again. It's been 40 years since the Knicks have won, and you guys are no better than they were yesterday. So you hear from all angles. But the beauty for me of being in those big markets is finding a way to win in those big markets and to be able to thrive in those big moments. And you have to have a certain type of personality to want to be able to deal with that every single day because it's a grind. And, Kevin, I would say, I'm a fan of the game, whether it's hockey, baseball, basketball, or football, soccer, whatever it may be, tennis, you name it, golf. But the guy who I admire the most is Derek Jeter. To be in the biggest market and to do it for 20 years like he did it and win 5 World Series rings for the New York Yankees, there's no bigger pressure cooker than playing for the New York Yankees. And for him to be able to do it the way that he did it for 20 years and had no scandals, and he was able to manipulate and maneuver around that market for 20 plus years to do what he did, to me, he's second to none.
It's funny you bring that up. I just had this conversation over the weekend. We were talking about some of the hidden jewels of working in sports. And I said, for me, one of my favorite aspects is getting to know the guys behind the scenes. At the rink, it's the equipment guys that run all the stuff, the skate sharpener, the sticks. But I'm going to go back to the ballpark. And you bring up Derek Jeter. I've talked to the guys that work over at Target Field. I worked with the Twins for 8 years, got to know them quite well. And every one of them, to a man, talked about how Derek Jeter treated people behind the scenes and what a quality human being he was. Biggest star on the planet. You never would have known it behind the scenes. So I find it fascinating because we have a lot of mutual friends in this market that work in broadcasting, and I hear a lot of the same things about you, like how you treat people when people aren't looking, the cameras aren't on. I hear that about Derek Jeter. I find that very interesting that you brought that name up. And I'm not going to name his teammate or any of his teammates, but they singled him out and said, above all, that guy was the best guy to work with.
I mean, I became a Yankee fan for 2 reasons. Dave Winfield and Derek Jeter. And I used to get, my friends here in town would call me, and if the Yankees lost, they would rag me and rip me every single chance they got. I said, but I'm a Yankee fan for one reason. It's because of the captain, number 2, Derek Jeter. I mean, and he performed on the biggest stage, and you could see the personality. I've gotten to know him over the years. I've sat down and had conversations with him. But he was the guy that was built to play baseball in Yankee Stadium.
Love that you brought his name up because we just got done having this conversation with some of my buddies a couple of days ago. All right, final part of the show is the hat trick hot seat. There's no wrong answer. We just get to know you a little bit better. Normally I ask our special guests about their very first concert. I'm going to modify the question because of where you played. if you had one, your favorite concert you ever took in New York at Madison Square Garden?
1987, Michael Jackson.
Oh,
The greatest concert I've ever seen. For 2 hours. And I'm not a real big concert goer.
mm-hmm.
The greatest entertainment that I've seen in a 2-hour span. It was like nothing I had ever experienced before. I was on my feet for 2 hours. And this was the beauty of this. I had a girlfriend back in New York at the time, and she and I go to the concert together. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I see this guy walk over to her, and he taps on his shoulder. And she says, well, you got to ask him. And the guy looks at me and says, Trent, Michael Jackson would like for your girlfriend to come up on stage and to be a part of his next act.
Come on.
And all the people around me were looking at me, right? And I said, you know what? If I lose my girlfriend to Michael Jackson, let it be so, right?
What a story.
I said, there's no way in the world that I can deny her the opportunity to be on stage with Michael Jackson. I said, yes. I said, yes, go for it. I said, because you're talking about the king of pop. and if I lose my girlfriend to Michael Jackson, you know what? I just got to live with that.
Did she go?
She went up there. And she was a part of his next routine and so forth. And we got a chance to meet him in the back when the concert was over and so forth. But 1987, that was the greatest concert I've been to.
Ooh, I don't know how we top that question. I'm gonna try to keep it together. Okay, when you were a player, your favorite city to be on the road, like to have a night off where you can enjoy the city. I mean, you're coming from New York or Chicago, so this is really a tough one. But where would you like to be on the NBA road?
I would say in the earlier part of my career, it was always Southern California. Playing against the Lakers. You got the stars, you got Jack, you got everybody in the house. And, it was just a pleasure when you walked to the scorer's table, you had to walk by Jack, and Jack knew your name. And
it's Jack Nicholson calling your name.
Right. And in the latter part of my career, there was nothing better on a cold month of January or February, having a 2 or 3 day trip to Southern Florida to play the Miami Heat. And I can remember there was a stretch in Philadelphia where every once in a while you get 4 or 5 days off, and it's unusual. So it was a Friday in Philadelphia, and we had to practice Thursday. And Phil Jackson says, okay, I give you guys an ultimatum. It's okay. He said, you beat Philadelphia on Friday, we go straight to Miami. And we don't play in Miami until Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
He said, you lose from Philadelphia, you come back to Chicago, and we leave on Tuesday. We beat Philadelphia by 30.
Sports Psychology 101.
Right.
Oh, that's fabulous. All right, final one. You got a night off. You and your beautiful wife are going to watch, but it's got to be a sports movie. What is your all-time favorite just to pop in and watch once in a while?
Sports movie? I would probably say, I won't call it a movie. I said we probably would enjoy watching The Last Dance.
It is really like a movie. I mean, I've watched it a couple of times. It's no different than a movie. It's a documentary, which classifies it being a movie. So that's a great answer. And it's the best. I've watched a bunch. And I think the 30 for 30s are unbelievably well put together. But that, to me, is the greatest sports documentary I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, many people have asked me, how close to the truth of this documentary. I said, it is the truth. I mean, Michael was a great teammate. And I enjoyed playing with Michael Jordan. It's because, to play with someone that good, you have to have a little chip on your shoulder as well. It's because you want to prove to him that I'm good enough to perform in the big moments. See, when the game is all said and done, and the boys get together. And there's Mario Lemieux, there's Wayne Gretzky, it's Michael Jordan, it's Derek Jeter, it's Roger Clemens, and he introduces you to this group, and he says, you know what? He made some big shots for us at championship time. All of a sudden now, you got street cred, you're among the group, and they say, oh, okay. See, because he presents that challenge to you.
Yep.
And is fun to be in that environment is because you're challenging yourself to say, am I good enough? Do I have the mental fortitude to withstand the pressure and the commitment that is facing me to get it done? And if I can get it done playing with the best in the world, like I said before, that means that I'm going to play basketball for a very long time. And at the end of the day, I'm always going to be in that special circle.
And I think you could feel that come out within that movie, that documentary of what it felt like to be around there. You lived it, you know it. And so that really validates what we all thought watching it. Trent, I could go on for hours with you. You're so easy to talk to, and I love just hearing the stories. Thank you for being a part of the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That's the great Trent Tucker. I'll be back after a quick break to put a close here on Wooden Sticks. All right, we're back, as always, recording from the Aquarius Home Services studio today on Wooden Sticks. So much fun to connect with Mr. Trent Tucker. Just a wonderful human being. It's an iconic voice, legendary sports guy here in this market in the Twin Cities, and really cool to hear about his kids today. And I've had a chance to listen to him speak, as I mentioned, to area high school captains, and I love his messaging. I love how these sports can cross-pollinate and how there is the right way to go about your business, and Trent Tucker has done that all his life. And I've had a chance to get to know him for many, many years, going back to when he used to hold his charity poker tournament out at Canterbury Park. And with Dark Star promoting it, Michael Jordan came into town. It was a huge deal for all of us at the racetrack. Trent has always been first class, and he played that way. He gained the respect of his teammates and coaches because of the way he competed and the class in which he did it, and you can hear that in our conversation today. I was just so thrilled to have a chance to connect with him and have him join us today on the show, because I do think a lot of the lessons that he has brought to us through basketball carry over to the rink. It has for his kids, certainly, and will for many years. Talented young guys that are going to play at a couple of great high school programs here locally. And then I just think for our listeners to hear some of that journey and to hear, what his perspective is. He's always had his own perspective. He's always been his own guy, and he's always done things the right way. And really, really neat to have that chance today to visit with Mr. Trent Tucker, and look forward to more these kind of conversations here as we are, quote unquote, into the off season. I know the playoffs are still going on in the National Hockey League, but a lot of good stuff coming this summer. And I'd love you to connect with me through social media. You can find me, obviously, most easy on X, which was formerly known as Twitter, at Gorgomatic21. Any suggestion you have for any type of guest, we'll try to connect with that guest. Maybe a question you have for an upcoming guest. We're going to try to have Billy Guerin on this summer, talk about some of the offseason plans for the Minnesota Wild. I mentioned a couple of players from the Frost. I've connected with Bob Motzko, the head coach with the Golden Gophers on the men's side. Definitely want to have him on as well. Any ideas you have, please don't hesitate to ping me. Come find me out at Canterbury Park. I'll be there all summer. We race Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I'm super easy to track down in the paddock. I'm out there every single race previewing what might be happening. Paul Allen on lead vocals out there, so come see me at Canterbury. And, of course, if you want to be a part of the show, or if you have a friend or a family member that needs their business elevated, we are here for you. All you've got to do is connect with the White Dog, Andrew Height, AHEYDT, at talknorth.com. and we'll get you involved. Looking forward to the next show. Looking forward to having you back. Thanks again for joining us here on Wooden Sticks.